Tonight in 7 National News, fear grips the northwest of the state following the gruesome discovery of 3 more murder victims.
Just days after a WA father and son were killed in cold blood, the discovery of 3 more victims has led police to believe a random thrill killer is at large in the state.
Good evening. The Kimberley region of the state's northwest is surrounded by roadblocks tonight as police attempt to corner a random killer. Police today recovered the bodies of 3 people, including a young couple about to be married, from the banks of the Pentecost River near Kununurra. They'd all been killed in a manner identical with the slaying of 2 Perth men nearby just last week. And there are warnings from police tonight that the killer could strike again.
That of a woman was found by the burnt-out wreck of a 4-wheel drive late yesterday afternoon. She had been shot 3 times in the back. Friends raised the alarm when she and 2 male companions failed to return from a fishing trip. Immediately, police reinforcements were rushed in, including members of Perth's crack tactical response group. Roadblocks were set up and a huge search was mounted, both for the killer and for the 2 missing men. Then this morning, their worst fears were realised. The grisly discovery of 2 more corpses. 3 kilometres downstream, it was the men. They too had been shot in the back. It's the similarity between these slayings and the murder of 2 West Australian tourists 250 kilometres away in the Northern Territory last week, which has police worried. They fear they're dealing with a crazed thrill killer.
Be on the alert for any strange vehicles, any strange movements. Make sure that any firearms they've got are secured, and be on the lookout.
This afternoon, a manhunt, the scale of which has never been seen before in this area, got underway. Local police and the tactical response group desperate to capture the man or men responsible for at least 5 slayings before they strike again. Mike Searle, 7 National News.
And now with the very latest in the search for the Kimberley Killer, we cross live to 7 reporter Mike Searle in Kununurra. And Mike, are the police any closer to catching our man?
No, they're not, Susie, but of course you have to remember the huge area they have to cover. The TRGE here, they're working with the local boys and they have the area sealed off. Their biggest worry is their man may already have flown the coop.
And things are still very tense in the town?
Yes, they are. People here are very angry. You remember the sort of situation we had in Albany after the British woman was killed down there? Well, that anger is growing here in Kununurra.
So how are the locals taking the news?
Well, Phil and Julie were a very popular couple. They were getting married next month, Susie. The town is very bitter. Tonight, the town is almost a ghost town. It's very quiet, and it's only 6 o'clock already. And it's going to stay that way until the police get their man.
Thanks very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
It appears certain the triple murder in the Kimberley is linked with the killing of 2 West Australian men in the Northern Territory last week. Police are searching for an Asian or Aboriginal man who's believed to be driving a tan Falcon station wagon.
These were the scenes in the Northern Territory last week after the gruesome discovery of murdered WA men Marcus Bullen, 70, and his 42-year-old son Lance. They'd been shot in the back and buried in shallow graves near Timber Creek while on a fishing trip. Their car was gutted. Any motive remains a mystery. This is the identikit picture of the man, said to be Asian or Aboriginal, wanted for questioning after the Bullens were killed. Because of the similarities with the murders in the Kimberley, police have few doubts the same person is responsible. And they've received strong leads in their search for the killer. A Kimberley bus driver has given police a similar description to the identikit sketch after seeing a man driving a light-coloured early model Falcon station wagon, similar to this one, on the Gibb River Road yesterday. It's the same type of car Northern Territory police have been looking for since last Tuesday. While the killer's on the loose, there's concern for the safety of everyone in the Kimberley.
If we could put out a warning to persons in that area, persons travelling through the area, to take extreme care and, where possible, keep to the main roads.
And a chilling warning tonight from a leading psychiatrist. Stop the Northwest Killer as soon as possible because he's sure to kill again. Dr. Paul Skerritt, chairman of the College of Psychiatrists, who's delved into the minds of our worst mass murderers, says once they have a taste for it, killers like this can't stop.
No one yet knows the identity of the Northwest thrill killer, but this cold-blooded mass murderer is no stranger to psychiatrists. They've seen it all happen before, fortunately only on rare occasions. Eric Edgar Cook shot 5 victims at random between 1959 and 1963. Last year, Catherine and David Burney claimed 4 innocent lives in a murderous sex thrill spree. So far, this latest killer has taken 5 lives, and psychiatrists believe the only predictable factor about him is that he will continue.
Unfortunately, history tends to suggest that patterns like this often are reproduced, and of course needs to be brought to a stop as soon as possible.
Dr. Skerritt and his colleagues, who have assessed many cold-blooded killers, say deterrents like capital punishment do not work because deeply disturbed people have no control.
The unfortunate people with these very severe disorders of personality really suffer from an inability to moderate their behaviour and to inhibit the behaviour.
Also in 7 National News tonight, claims of cruelty.
In 7 National News tonight, the hunt for the Kimberley Killer continues.
While in Perth, the family of the murdered couple tell how they coped with their ordeal.
Here for you and are looking after you, and it's so wonderful to know that Julie and Philip are together in heaven.
Good evening. Also in 7 National News tonight, the Liberal Party's radical health policy.
And in sport, rumours fly about the future of Eagles coach Ron Alexander.
One of the biggest manhunts in West Australian history continues tonight as police desperately search for a killer they fear may strike again. There's now concern that more than one person may be involved in the slaying of 5 people in the last week in Australia's remote north. In a moment, we'll cross live to Kununurra for the latest on the manhunt. But first, this report on today's events.
It was at a hastily arranged news conference on the lawn of the Kununurra police station. Police announced they are now hunting the driver of a white Toyota Hilux.
This vehicle has got bright orange or bright red stripes down the side of it, and it has 1 male occupant in it.
This is in addition to the Asian or Aboriginal who's thought to be driving a 1970 or 72 tan XY or XC Ford Falcon wagon. Both cars were at the scene of the slaying 8 days ago of 2 West Australian tourists near Katherine in the Northern Territory, and police fear the 2 men could be playing the deadly game between them. But police are remaining tight-lipped about the type of gun the killer or killers may be using, despite speculation they could be using automatic weapons or a sniper's rifle. Last night, Kununurra was a town locked up tighter than a drum. People are scared, worried they could be the next victim, especially as it's claimed the Asian had been in town for at least 3 days before gunning down his 3 victims, possibly planning his next move. On Saturday he was seen at this filling station, but the woman who served him is too scared to talk. And it's the same story here at the town's swimming pool where he was spotted last Friday. The woman who saw him is just too frightened to go on camera. In Kununurra, Mike Searle, 7 National News.
And now we cross live to 7 reporter Mike Searle in Kununurra. Mike, what's the latest?
Well, the town, Susanna, has almost taken on an air of siege, if by nothing else then certainly by the media. The anger I spoke of yesterday is growing, and as the reality of what's happened sinks in, more and more people are becoming afraid, and certainly again tonight, Kununurra is a town of fear.
I believe the police held a news conference today. What about that?
Yes, that broke up a couple of hours ago. Police have set up roadblocks up to 1,200 kilometres away in Broome, perhaps an indication that the man they're after may already have left the area. They've also issued a description of him. He's 25 years old, about 180 centimetres tall, that's around 6 feet. He has dark hair and a fair complexion. But what's possibly more interesting about the conference, Susanna, well, quite a few of the people there were members of the public, hungry for information. Again, a clear indication that the people here really have a concern about their future. And it was the same in the township again today. People in the shops, hanging around cars, listening to radio news bulletins, almost like a wartime situation. Again, an illustration, people up here really are afraid.
Thanks very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Mike Searle in Kununurra. Well, the grief-stricken parents and relatives of the young engaged murder victims said today their strong religious faith is helping them through their ordeal. As they spoke of their torment to 7 National News reporter ALISON fan today, phone calls were coming in from all over Australia offering prayers of support.
25-year-old Julianne Warren and her 26-year-old fiancé Philip Walkermeyer had set their wedding date for Saturday the 25th of next month. Julie's family were preparing to fly over from New Zealand. Philip's family were also making preparations. Instead, they've been brought together in this Carlisle home for the couple's funeral. But for the Walkermeyer family, it's their unshakable Lutheran religion which is holding them together.
We have had a lot of comfort in yesterday. We have had friends from all around Australia that have rung us up, Christian people, and said that they have offered their prayers and thoughts to us. And I'm quite sure with them praying in their prayer groups throughout, it has given us, our family and our friends, a lot of comfort and relief in our suffering.
Philip's sister Anna says that faith has been strengthened by friends and strangers from across the country.
I have a friend in Queensland who I rang yesterday, and she has prayer groups all over Australia praying for us, and I know that this has been the reason why we are able to cope and be so strong. And it's so wonderful to know that you have so many friends who care for you and are looking after you. And it's so wonderful to know that Julie and Philip are together in heaven.
Police revealed today the cold-blooded killer had stolen jewellery from his victims. The missing pieces are described as Julie's silver oval-shaped watch, her diamond white gold engagement ring, a tiny diamond love ring, and possibly a pendant of New Zealand power shell. The Walkermeyers' faithful dog, who was with the couple when they were shot, is also missing. He's a 5-year-old red cloud kelpie answering to Sasha. ALISON fan, 7 National News.
In 7 National News tonight, tourists evacuated as the hunt continues for the Kimberley Killer.
In Perth, family and friends gather to bury the killer's first victims.
And the man accused of killing English tourist Susan Frost tries to commit suicide.
Good evening. Also in 7 National News tonight, a major disruption for air travellers.
And attempts to legalise gay sex in WA are thrown out of state parliament.
Julianne Warren, one of the Kimberley Killer's 5 victims, was shot in the back and left to die on the banks of the lonely Pentecost River near Kununurra. Police today revealed that Miss Warren bled to death after a single shot from a high-powered rifle. The man she was to marry next month, Philip Walkermeyer, and friend Terry Bolt, whose bodies were found further downstream, both died of multiple gunshot wounds. Meanwhile, as the cause of the grisly deaths was revealed, police confirmed that the trail of the cold-blooded killer had gone stale. But with the man who's murdered 5 still on the loose, tourists are fleeing isolated areas.
It's now been 9 days since the killer first struck, gunning down 2 West Australian tourists in the Northern Territory. 4 days since the triple murder at Pentecost Creek here at Kununurra. And so far police have drawn a blank. Now, in a last-ditch attempt before he strikes again, they've called in a black tracker.
If I track him down, he won't know where he's going. If I get my horse to track him down, he won't get anywhere.
And while Reg says the killer is heading towards Wyndham, remote tourist camps are closing down. Today, police okayed the evacuation of Bungle Bungle. Campers and rangers heading for the relative safety of a town. Rangers told campers to pack up this morning, a convoy this afternoon winding its way to Kununurra and Halls Creek.
The order is to evacuate.
And what's the story with you, the Rangers families? They're out as well?
Rangers families are all out. We're a mobile unit and we're on our way. My wife's with me and everybody is out and we're on our way out now.
It's not worth taking any risks, so out we go.
I didn't sleep very well last night. A bit worried.
The campsite here at Bungle Bungle is deserted. Everybody's gone. And can you blame them? It's claimed the rifle this guy's using could pick someone off from a kilometre away. That's one of the reasons why civilian aircraft has been banned from the search area. It's said he could even shoot a helicopter from the sky.
Hit in the right position, yeah.
Would you fly into that area?
No, I don't want to get shot down.
It's the fact nobody knows where the killer is hiding which has people worried. Anyone who has a gun and goes out of town is carrying it with them.
I always carry one.
Would you use it if you had to?
Oh, for sure.
And now, with the latest on the search for the killer, we cross live to Mike Searle in Kununurra. Mike, are the police any closer to getting their man?
No, not really, Rick. They have widened their roadblock perimeters. They're now as far south as Port Hedland, which is almost halfway to Perth and back into the Northern Territory. But although police are saying publicly they expect to make an early arrest, privately they say he'll kill again before they actually catch him.
Mike, have police been able to confirm in any way what type of weapon was being used by the killer?
Well, police are keeping tight-lipped about that, Rick. However, they have admitted that he is using a high-powered rifle, and the ammunition that he's using could be used in any type of, or in many types of gun, or many types of weapons. One thing's for sure, he is a sniper, and one who enjoys cutting people down.
And why has it been so difficult to track down the wanted man?
Well, I flew out to the Bungle Bungle National Park today, Rick, and between here and there is just miles and miles of desolation. It would be easy for the fugitive to hide out there for months and months without being seen.
Thanks, Mike. Keep us posted.
Meanwhile, the Kimberley Killer's first two victims, Marcus and Lance Bullen, were buried in Perth today. Hundreds gathered to pay their last respects to the men murdered while on holiday near Katherine in the Northern Territory.
It was a doubly sad occasion for the Bullen widows today, following the hearses which carried their husbands' bodies. The cars were filled with floral tributes for the father and son, tragically murdered by a crazed killer, believed to still be stalking the north of the state. And to meet the funeral procession today, knowing the loss this family has endured, were hundreds of people there to pay their last respects. Initial news of the murders shocked family, friends and neighbours of the Bullens, who only days before the slayings had received postcards from the foursome, saying what a wonderful time they were having. It was to be their dream holiday on remote Victoria River, but it turned into a nightmare when the naked bodies of the men were found shot in the back and buried in a river bank. Police launched a huge manhunt for the killer, but found no sign of him and no motive for the senseless murders. Today, mourners followed the funeral cortege for the two men, attending a brief but sorrow-filled graveside service, where Marcus and Lance Bullen were laid to rest side by side. They were both well known and well respected, the 70-year-old father being a former Deputy Lord Mayor of Fremantle in the 1970s. Carolyn Bertram for 7 National News.
In 7 National News tonight, one of the state's biggest manhunts ends in a hail of bullets as police gun down the Kimberley Killer.
And in Perth, police believe they've caught the notorious bank robber Andy Camp.
Good evening. And first up tonight, one of the biggest ever manhunts this state has seen ended this afternoon in a hail of bullets. Police officers from the Crack Tactical Response Group in Fitzroy Crossing gunned down a man they believe was the craze killer, responsible for murdering 5 people in the northwest over the past week.
An intensive land and air search for the murderer was over at 3 o'clock this afternoon in the north of the state. A search helicopter pilot spotted the Toyota 4Runner vehicle stolen by the crazed killer. It was found 10 kilometres out of the Fitzroy Crossing township, camouflaged under a canopy of bushes. TRG officers were flown from Kununurra to the crossing this afternoon. When they approached the vehicle, a man alighted and opened fire on them with a high-powered rifle. Officers returned fire, fatally wounding the gunman. He died at the scene. At a press conference today, police say they believe they know the murderer's identity, but are not releasing his name. However, it is understood he may have been a West German tourist. A police inspector is travelling from Kununurra tonight for further inquiries and to decide whether the body will be flown back to Perth. The killer's death comes after a week of anger, frustration and heartbreak for the families of the 5 dead people. Marcus and Lance Bullen of Fremantle and South Hedland were the killer's first victims. The father and son were found on remote Victoria River, naked and shot dead while on what they called a dream holiday with their wives. The killer's next victims were found 300 kilometres away on Pentecost River earlier this week. Julie Warren and her fiancé Philip Walkermeyer and their friend Terry Bolt were all found naked and again shot in the back. Carolyn Bertram for 7 National News.
In fact, 7 National News reporter Mike Searle was the only journalist in the area at the time of the shootout. He's just returned to Kununurra. Mike, what's the latest? It's certainly been a busy period.
Certainly has, Rick. Well, I've just flown in from Fitzroy Crossing. We were actually there above the shootout as it happened. Let me tell you what's happened up here. It was this morning at around around 8 o'clock when the TRG, 2 plane loads of TRG officers flew out of Kununurra on a secret mission. They didn't even bother filing a flight plan. They arrived in Fitzroy Crossing a short time after that. I first heard of the fact that they'd found the car around 1 o'clock. We chartered a plane. We were just about to take off when we heard that, in actual fact, they had closed the airport at Fitzroy Crossing, an unprecedented move. Nevertheless, we had enough fuel for the return trip. We took off. We arrived at Kununurra we arrived at Fitzroy Crossing just before 3 o'clock. We were circling the airport. We asked repeatedly for permission to land. We were told to leave the area immediately, go away. We circled the town a couple of times. We saw the police roadblocks, and at that stage, we understand the shootout was going on. We then flew away, as we were requested to do, and it was then that we heard over the aircraft radio that the guy had actually been shot. We then found a private airstrip outside the 10-kilometre zone, landed there. Ingo Hilberg, Channel 7 cameraman, is there at the moment. He's the only cameraman on the scene. We'll have pictures from him tomorrow.
Mike, another point too, what's been the reaction of the locals? Has the news of the shooting filtered through to them? They were very concerned.
They were extremely concerned. I've only been back in town 10 minutes. I haven't got a clue what the feeling of the town's like, but I can tell you there's going to be a lot of relief. The West Australian Police Force, bouquets all over for what they've done. They've tracked down a man in less than a week, a man that's killed 5 people. They've covered an area the size of some European countries. They deserve praise from the very highest level tonight.
Thanks, Michael. Again, keep us up to date.
Okay.
And back to that story of the Northwest Killer, and 2 of the victims will be cremated at the Karrakatta Cemetery tomorrow at 10:30. And today, their family spoke to State Affairs' Marie Mills about today's dramatic turn of events and the strong faith which has seen them through their ordeal.
Well, we are pleased to know that that he has been caught now and that no other families will be affected by this. We're just pleased that God has really answered everyone's prayers, that he has stopped now and found.
In 7 National News tonight, details of the dramatic shootout which ended the Kimberley Killer's reign of terror.
While in the southwest, hundreds gather to call for the return of the death penalty.
Good evening. Also in 7 National News tonight, the man alleged to be Perth's notorious handicap bank robber appears in court.
And later in sport, mud, sweat and tears at the WACA.
A dramatic revelation from the northwest tonight. Police are apparently searching for 2 people who were travelling with the killer, who's been dubbed the Desert Stalker. It's believed the killer may have murdered his 2 companions before yesterday's dramatic shootout near Fitzroy Crossing.
No, there's just a vehicle covered over parked under a tree.
That was the first sighting yesterday of the man who's killed 5 West Australians, spotted by chopper pilot Peter Ludenegger. That was at 6 a.m. while mustering horses. He immediately told police. The TRG was scrambled from Kununurra. A police plane guided the crack paramilitary unit to the killer's location. Hidden under a green tarpaulin and dressed in army greens, the Desert Stalker had thousands of rounds of ammunition ready for a shootout. The police plane banked and bombed him with tear gas and smoke grenades. The Spinifex caught alight, sending smoke billowing into the air. The police plane swooped and the killer shot at the plane, making a hole in the fuselage. It was then the police opened fire, cutting the killer down.
We haven't identified him, and we're having a bit of problems with that. Don't know who he is.
If it hadn't been for the fact the town had its rodeo this weekend, then the killer would still be on the loose, and the consequences could have been horrific. Every year Fitzroy Crossing has its rodeo on this weekend, and the big fear is if the man hadn't been caught, then he would have come here and had a field day. Locals say the sniper could have positioned himself anywhere and then just picked people off at will, and with the carnival atmosphere, panic and carnage would have resulted. So, who was the killer? Police just don't know. He may be a West German student, then again, he may be a white Australian carrying the papers of one of his victims. Although publicly police say they don't know who he is, privately I understand they do think he is the West German tourist Joseph Schwab. They're also looking for 2 people who were travelling with him. The only thing is, they now believe they too may have become his victims. Mike Searle, 7 National News.
And it was a sorrow-filled double funeral today for the young engaged couple tragically murdered by the crazed Kimberley Killer earlier this week. Julie Warren and Philip Walkermeyer were due to be married next month.
Julie and Philip were a fun-loving couple according to their families, recently announcing their engagement and looking forward to married life together. Tragically, those dreams ended earlier this week when the couple and their close friend Terry Bolt were found naked and shot dead on remote Pentecost River. They were the last victims of the Northwest Killer, who police believe was fatally wounded yesterday in a dramatic shootout at Fitzroy Crossing. But today in Perth, the Walkermeyer and Warren families were saying their last goodbyes to a couple who they say had so much to live for. And at Karrakatta Cemetery, hundreds of mourners turned out to pay their last respects to the couple, whose bodies were cremated after a Lutheran service. Their ashes will be laid to rest side by side, Julie and Philip's families saying they'll now just live with treasured memories of the couple. Carolyn Bertram for 7 National News.
WA's violent crime wave has drawn an angry response from nearly 1,000 people attending a rally in Bunbury today. Residents across the southwest turned out to voice their support for a return of the death penalty.
In 7 National News tonight, conflicting views on the identity of the Kimberley Killer.
A 21-year-old jailbird makes easy work of Canning Vale Prison security system.
And a plane crash claims 4 lives. Good evening, everyone. Also in 7 National News tonight, John Howard admits a mathematical error in his tax policy.
And problems over police radar traps.
Police in Western Australia say they are still unable to positively identify the man dubbed the Desert Stalker, who was killed in a shootout with police near Fitzroy Crossing 2 days ago. The killer's body was flown back to Perth overnight for a post-mortem examination, while police are still refusing to allow reporters into the area where he was shot down.
9:55 last night at Derby Airport, and the body of the Desert Stalker has been in a hangar for 8 hours. With very little fuss, the killer's remains are loaded on board the Ansett flight for Perth. By stark contrast, on its arrival, tight security. 3 police cars flank the contractor's van as the corpse is offloaded. The contrast continued today with very little activity at the scene of the shootout on Plum Plain near Fitzroy Crossing. The only reminder of the battle, the burnt-out Spinifex where the smoke bombs and tear gas canisters exploded. Locals say he'd been in the area since Tuesday and was planning on a long stay. He had 4 cases of beer, plenty of cans of food and a jungle survival book written in German. Meantime, the area is still restricted.
The scene will just continue to be examined. I've got some more people to come to help us.
Forensic.
It's known the killer had 3 high-powered rifles and a .22 Magnum, as well as 3,000 rounds of ammunition. The white Toyota 4Runner had also run out of fuel. The exact number of the stalker's victims is still not known. Stories about missing people continue, but police are unable to verify them. The fear is that the final figure could be as many as 8. At Fitzroy Crossing, Mike Searle, 7 National News.
And while the police claim they don't know positively who the killer is, Police Minister Gordon Hill today told a different story. In an interview with 7 National News, Mr Hill confirmed that the killer was German tourist Joseph Sroub.
I've been informed by the Assistant Commissioner of Crime, Max Marshall, that the fingerprints have arrived from West Germany which give a positive identification, and that identification is that the West German tourist, Mr Schwab, was that person.